Most people think the rich live by the same money rules as everyone else, just with bigger numbers. That is not true. Wealth is not only about how much money comes into your life, it is also about the private rules that decide what money becomes after it arrives. The wealthy are not simply better at earning. Very often, they are better at keeping, protecting, delaying, and placing money. They understand when money should stay quiet, when it should become an asset, when it should be left alone, and when it should never be spent just to create the appearance of progress. That is why two people can earn similar incomes for years and still build completely different lives. One person becomes more stable, more patient, and harder to shake. The other person stays busy, visible, and financially fragile, even while seeming to do everything a responsible adult is supposed to do. In this video, we are going to break down the 5 money rules the rich follow quietly. These rules do not look glamorous in the moment. They do not create fast applause, but over time they separate real financial strength from financial performance. And most people do not learn them until expensive mistakes have already done their damage. That is why this video is not really about admiration. It is about pattern recognition. If you can see the rules clearly, you can stop mistaking visible movement for real wealth. You can stop confusing a louder life with a stronger one, and you can start noticing the quiet behaviors that actually change a financial future. Before we get into the first rule, we need to clear up one dangerous misunderstanding. Most people think wealth is created through one dramatic event, a huge raise, a brilliant investment, a great business idea, one lucky moment that changes everything. That story is emotionally satisfying, but it is not how wealth usually forms in real life. Real wealth is more often built through a quiet operating system. It comes from a handful of repeated decisions that decide whether money stays in your life long enough to become safety, then capital, then leverage. If those decisions are weak, even good income can disappear into a more expensive version of the same vulnerability. If those decisions are strong, even moderate income can slowly become something lasting. That is the tragedy for most ordinary people. They are taught how to earn. They are taught how to buy. They are taught how to upgrade. They are taught how to signal that life is improving, but they are not taught how to make money harder to remove from the future. They are not taught how to keep extra money alive long enough for it to become strength. This is why two people can make the same income in the same city and still move in opposite directions. One person's extra money becomes margin, assets, and options. The other person's extra money becomes higher fixed costs, finance convenience, and emotional relief. From the outside, the two lives can look equally normal. Under pressure, one structure gets stronger while the other starts to crack. These 5 rules matter because they explain that split. They explain why some people seem to move quietly but get stronger every year, while others stay noisy, busy, and always close to the edge. These rules do not make you look rich right away. They make you hard to shake. And that difference is where real wealth usually begins. That is also why wealth often looks confusing from the outside. People see income, but they do not see saved margin. They see purchases, but they do not see how exposed a person really is. They see confidence, but they do not see whether that confidence is backed by cash, options, and patience, or whether it is only being paid for by the next paycheck. Once you understand that, a lot of financial life starts making more sense. You stop asking only who earns more, and you start asking whose money is being organized under stronger rules. Because over long periods of time, rules beat intentions, rules beat motivation, rules even beat talent more often than people want to admit. The first rule is simple, but most people break it all the time. Keep more than you display. In other words, do not let your visible lifestyle grow faster than your invisible strength. Ordinary people are pushed to prove progress almost as soon as money arrives. A little more income appears, and the pressure to show a better life quickly follows. Sometimes that means upgrading the apartment. Sometimes it means loosening everyday spending. Sometimes it means replacing things that were still working simply because your outer life now feels like it should match your inner effort. On the surface, that feels normal. In fact, it often feels required. Modern life rewards visible performance and quietly punishes modesty. If your income rises and your outer life does not change much, people begin to wonder what happened. Sometimes you begin to wonder too. You start feeling that new money must be turned into a new image, or else it does not count as progress. The wealthy often think in the opposite direction. They ask a quieter question: what can I keep? What can I protect? What can I leave untouched long enough to become real strength? They understand that displayed money disappears quickly, while saved money changes your options. It becomes patience. It becomes a buffer. It becomes negotiating power. It becomes the ability to survive a bad season without instantly falling into fear. That is why one of the most underrated signs of real wealth is restraint. Not because rich people never enjoy anything, but because they do not confuse visible comfort with financial progress. A larger monthly payment can make life look upgraded while making the structure underneath weaker than before. A nicer version of the same lifestyle can quietly destroy the very extra money that could have become long-term security. Real wealth is often invisible for longer than people expect. It looks like money that was not spent. It looks like a raise that did not immediately become a more expensive identity. It looks like someone who could upgrade faster than they do, but chooses not to, because they understand what saved capital can become if it is left alone. Many people never realize how often they are spending to maintain a story rather than strengthen a future. They are not buying stability. They are buying confirmation. They are buying the emotional proof that their effort has finally become visible. But money that is constantly used to create appearances cannot stay in your life long enough to become protection. And this rule matters even more in a culture where almost everything is designed to be seen. Social media, consumer credit, lifestyle signaling, and status pressure all work together to make display feel rational. That is why keeping more than you display is not just a math rule. It is also a psychological rebellion. It requires you to accept that some of your strongest financial moves will not look impressive to people who only understand visible success. That is the cost of breaking rule number 1. The more aggressively you display progress, the less quietly you keep power. The rich understand that the first job of money is not to impress the outside world. It is to make your inner financial life harder to break. Rule number 2 is this: buy assets, not relief. This one rule explains a huge amount of financial separation, because most people do not lose ground through one dramatic error. They lose ground through repeated purchases that feel emotionally justified but economically weak. Think about how ordinary money stress actually works. You work all week. By the end of it, you are mentally worn down. You feel under-rewarded, a little behind, and tired of being careful. Then money comes in. In that state, what do you want most? Usually not leverage, usually not ownership, usually not something that pays you back 5 years from now. You want relief. You want something immediate that softens the pressure of the week you just survived. So the extra money becomes convenience, upgrades, subscriptions, better food, faster comfort, a more expensive weekend, or some purchase that feels small enough to excuse. None of that is evil. That is exactly what makes this rule hard. Most people are not foolish caricatures. They are exhausted human beings trying to buy a little breathing room inside a life that already feels tight. But economically, buying relief is very different from buying assets. Relief fades quickly. It gives you a feeling and then disappears. Assets remain. A cash buffer remains. A useful skill remains. A tool that increases earnings remains. Ownership in something productive remains. Money moved into a structure that can protect or multiply remains. The rich think in terms of what stays. The average person is more often pushed into thinking in terms of what soothes. One mindset asks, what will this money become for me in 5 years? The other asks, what will make this week feel easier? If you repeat the second question often enough, your future gets quietly sold off in small pieces. This is why some financial decisions feel harmless but become expensive when repeated. One small act of relief is not the issue. The problem is when relief becomes the default destination of extra money. Then every moment of stress pulls money away from assets and back into consumption. Over time, the person is not just spending cash, they are spending the chance for that cash to ever harden into structure. That is why so many financial lives never really move forward even when income improves. The new money arrives, but it is turned into better feelings instead of stronger positions. Then a year later, the person looks up and says, I make more than I used to, but I still do not feel secure. Of course not. Money that keeps becoming relief never gets the chance to become power. The rich quietly follow the opposite rule. They allow part of their money to remain boring. They allow part of it to stay uncomfortable. They do not demand that every dollar make them feel better right away. They leave some of it in forms that do not soothe the present, so it can strengthen the future. That is one of the deepest differences between average and wealthy behavior. The average person often wants money to reduce emotional pressure today. The wealthy person is more willing to let money serve a longer mission. They know that financial freedom is not bought only by income. It is bought by repeatedly refusing to turn every extra dollar into a temporary emotional painkiller. Rule number 3 is deeply Buffett-like in spirit. Protect the downside first. The rich understand something ordinary. Earners usually learn through pain. Progress that can be erased easily is not real progress. If one layoff, one medical bill, one sharp rent increase, or one broken transmission can wipe out months of discipline, then your financial life is still too fragile to support serious growth. You may be moving, but you are moving on a surface that keeps cracking under pressure. That is not compounding. That is repeated recovery. Average people are usually trained to think upside first. How can I make more? What opportunity looks exciting? What might go up? What can speed things up? The rich spend far more energy protecting against ugly outcomes. They build buffers. They reduce unnecessary fragility. They avoid structures where one bad month can force them into a chain reaction of terrible decisions. This does not feel glamorous, which is exactly why it gets underestimated. For someone living close to the edge, downside protection sounds boring compared with investing stories, side hustle fantasies, or high-return narratives. But if your structure cannot survive interruption, then even good opportunities become dangerous. Panic destroys judgment. Desperation destroys patience. Fear shortens time horizons. That is why the first meaningful pile of cash matters so much. Not because it makes you look wealthy, but because it creates shock absorption. It lets you face reality without instantly falling into reactive debt. It changes the emotional texture of decision-making. You stop making every choice with a loaded gun pointed at your month. Once fear drops, patience improves. Once patience improves, decision quality improves. Once decision quality improves, stronger opportunities become easier to hold. That is why protection is not the opposite of growth. It is often the condition that makes growth possible in the first place. This is also why the rich are often more conservative in ways ordinary people misunderstand. They are not always being timid. They are preserving the structure that allows them to stay in the game. They know that one avoidable blow can set back not just money, but judgment, confidence, and time. Protecting the downside is a way of protecting momentum itself. The rich understand that the first rule of compounding is survival. You do not have to win dramatically at the beginning. You have to avoid being broken repeatedly. Protecting the downside is not fear, it is structural intelligence, and most people learn it only after life has already charged them tuition the expensive way. The painful truth is that people usually become obsessed with downside protection only after they have lived through a season where everything felt too close to collapse. A missed payment, a broken car, a medical surprise, a few bad weeks at work. Those experiences teach the lesson very fast, but the rich try to learn the lesson before the impact, not after it. Rule number 4 is this: increase the value of each hour. The rich are not simply obsessed with working hard. They are obsessed with making each unit of effort worth more. Most ordinary people live inside a linear model. More hours means more income. Fewer hours means less income. A raise helps, but only a little. Overtime helps, but only temporarily. Everything depends on continued labor, continued availability, and continued energy. That structure can keep life working, but it also creates a ceiling because your body, your time, and your attention are all limited. The wealthy ask a different question. How can the same hour produce more over time? How can one effort continue paying after the original work is done? That is where leverage begins. Sometimes it is ownership. Sometimes it is pricing power. Sometimes it is a rarer skill, a reusable system, a platform, a reputation, a distribution advantage, or capital placed in something productive. The form changes. The principle does not. They do not want their entire future trapped inside a pure hours for money equation. They want each hour to become more valuable, more repeatable, or less dependent on constant manual effort. They want to build a structure where effort continues to matter after the immediate task is complete. This rule changes the way you judge work itself. A person can be extremely busy and still be trapped. Another person can seem to be doing less while quietly increasing the long-term output of every hour they give. One is trapped in motion. The other is slowly changing the equation. This is why two hardworking people can end up in radically different places. One keeps adding effort to the same low-value structure. The other keeps increasing the value of the structure itself. One becomes busier. The other becomes harder to replace. One gets paid mainly for labor. The other begins to get paid for judgment, skill, ownership, systems, or scarcity. In practice, that can mean very ordinary decisions. Learning a skill with stronger pricing power, moving toward work where your judgment matters more than your time, creating something that can be sold more than once, negotiating harder because your value is clearer, building ownership even if it starts small. These moves are not always dramatic in the beginning, but they change the value of the hour in ways over time never can. And here is the hard part many people never notice. They are climbing the wrong mountain. They are proud of how hard they work, but not honest about what that work is structurally producing. If every additional hour still has weak pricing power, weak protection, and no repeatability, then the future will remain tight, even if the present looks disciplined. The rich quietly follow a different rule. Before they chase more effort, they ask how to make effort worth more. That single shift changes the entire path of a financial life. Rule number 5 is the quietest rule of them all. Stay quiet while you build. This may be the most psychologically difficult rule in the entire video because modern culture trains people to seek visible proof before results are mature. You are supposed to show momentum quickly, show confidence quickly, show the better lifestyle quickly, show that your efforts are working in a form other people can recognize. The rich often do the opposite. They build quietly for long stretches while almost nothing on the outside looks dramatic. This quietness is not mystical, it is practical. Quiet builders do not need every move to be seen. They do not need every gain to become a performance. They are more tolerant of boring repetition, delayed payoff, and invisible progress. They understand that some of the most important financial moves feel deeply unimpressive in real time. Paying down debt is not exciting. Building a cash reserve is not exciting. Buying broad, productive assets consistently is not exciting. Learning a skill for 2 years before it changes your pay is not exciting. Refusing lifestyle inflation is not exciting. But these are exactly the kinds of moves that become enormous later. That is why quiet progress feels so emotionally expensive at first. You are doing the right thing, but the right thing is not giving you a dramatic identity yet. You are becoming stronger, but you cannot show it off in a way that gets instant social reward. To the outside world, it may look like not much is happening. Internally, however, the structure is changing. Average people often give up strong strategies because the strategy does not produce an emotional rush fast enough. Quiet progress feels too slow, too plain, too invisible. So they switch plans, chase stimulation and status, or demand proof before the math has had time to work. The rich are quieter partly because they have accepted the emotional shape of real compounding. It is slow before it becomes obvious. It is boring before it becomes powerful. This rule matters because wealth is often lost in the need to feel successful too early. If you need the outside world to confirm that you are winning, you will constantly be tempted to spend, signal, or abandon the process before it matures. Quiet builders resist that urge. They let strength form in private. They understand that some of the most decisive financial seasons of life are the ones that look ordinary from the outside and transformative from the inside. And that may be the deepest reason the rich follow this rule quietly. They do not need every chapter to be visible. They are more comfortable with private progress. They know that the loudest season of a financial life is often not the strongest one. The strongest one is usually the one where discipline compounds before recognition arrives. Why do most people learn these rules too late? Because modern life teaches almost the opposite. It teaches people to look successful before they become secure. It teaches them to expand lifestyle faster than margin. It teaches them to spend a raise before they know how to protect it. It teaches comparison before structure. By the time many people finally see these rules clearly, they are already carrying a heavy set of of expensive decisions. Their fixed costs are too high. Their buffer is too small. Their habits are organized around relief instead of strength. Their time has been sold for years inside a structure that never became leverage. The lesson arrives, but it arrives after a lot of damage has already been quietly added up. That is why these rules feel rare. Not because they are impossible to understand, but because almost everything around ordinary people is designed to pull attention somewhere else. Toward visibility, toward urgency, toward comfort, toward consumption, toward social proof. Very little in modern money culture says, keep more, protect more, delay more, and build quietly. Most people are not ignorant because they are incapable. They are simply being trained by a system that rewards the appearance of progress faster than the substance of progress. They are encouraged to look upgraded long before they are financially durable. So by the time they finally understand the real rules, the cost of not knowing them has already been paid in lost time, weak buffers, bad structures, and repeated resets. That is why these rules often feel like something the wealthy somehow kept to themselves. In reality, the rules are not hidden behind a locked door. They are just drowned out by louder messages. Consume now, display now, upgrade now, reward yourself now, keep pace now. When those messages are repeated for years, quiet wealth rules can feel almost invisible, even when they are sitting right in front of you. The point of hearing these rules is not to feel ashamed that you learned them later than you wanted to. The point is to shorten the delay. Even if you learn them later than the rich did, learning them now is still cheaper than learning them after another decade of preventable mistakes. That is why timing matters so much. The earlier you move from performance to structure, the more years you recover. The earlier you stop using money to create an image and start using it to create durability, the more the future begins to cooperate. Most people do not need a miracle. They need to stop learning the right lessons so late. So here is the real separation. The rich keep more than they display. They buy assets instead of relief. They protect the downside before chasing the upside. They increase the value of each hour instead of only increasing effort. And they stay quiet while they build. None of those rules sounds glamorous at first. In fact, that is part of the reason they are so often ignored. They sound too restrained, too repetitive, and too unexciting. But real financial strength usually looks exactly like that in the beginning. Quiet, consistent, easy to underestimate from the outside, extremely powerful over time. That is why the rich quietly follow them while most people learn them too late. Not because the rich are a different species, but because they are operating from a different internal script. That script changes what money becomes inside life. It changes whether money turns into pressure or margin, noise or stability, appearance or leverage. So if you take one thing from this video, let it be this. Do not try to fix all 5 rules at once. Find the one you are breaking most often right now and start there. Correct it on purpose. Stay with it long enough to feel the structure begin to change. Maybe the rule you break most often is display. Maybe it is relief. Maybe it is fragile downside exposure. Maybe your hours are still undervalued. Maybe you gave up quiet progress too early because you need proof too fast. Wherever the weakness is, that is where the repair should begin. Because wealth is rarely built by one dramatic move. More often, it begins the moment you stop treating money like performance and start treating it like architecture. That is when the future stops looking decorative and starts becoming durable. And once that shift begins, money behaves differently inside your life. It stops disappearing into noise quite so easily. It starts creating room. It starts creating patience. It starts creating choices. That is why these quiet rules matter so much. They do not just change numbers. They change the structure of your future. That's all. Thanks for watching.